The strangest thing about getting a raise is that the number is supposed to feel like progress, but a lot of the time it feels almost insulting. You work harder, take on more, become more reliable, solve more problems, maybe even make the company more money, and then the reward comes in the form of 3%. 3%. Just enough for someone to technically say you got a raise, but not enough for your life to feel meaningfully different. And the worst part is not even the number. The worst part is how normal it has become. So normal that people barely question it anymore. They shrug, accept it, and move on. But that is exactly why this matters. Because once something unfair becomes normal, it becomes invisible. And when it becomes invisible, people stop fighting the real problem and start blaming themselves for a system that was never designed to reward them fairly in the first place. Here is the truth most people never hear clearly. Your 3% raise is usually not a reward for your full value. It is not a reflection of everything you contributed. In many cases, it is something much simpler, much colder, and much more revealing. It is an administrative number, a budgeting number, a control number, a number designed to maintain a system, not to transform your life. And if you do not understand that, you will keep interpreting tiny raises as personal judgments instead of structural signals. That misunderstanding can cost you years of income, confidence, and career momentum. Because this is not just about why raises are small. It is about what that small number is teaching you without saying it out loud. It is about why so many smart, hardworking people stay financially stuck even while technically moving forward. It is about why employees who are loyal, productive, and patient often earn less than people who switch jobs more aggressively. It is about how companies think, how budgets work, how inflation quietly steals the meaning of a raise, and how your psychology gets shaped by all of it. And once you really see the pattern, you stop asking, why am I only getting 3%? And start asking a much more powerful question, why did I ever believe this system was meant to reflect my true worth in the first place? That question changes everything. Because for a lot of people, salary raises are emotionally loaded in a way they never fully admit. A raise feels like recognition. It feels like proof. It feels like validation that the long hours mattered, that the effort was noticed, that the patience was justified. So when the raise comes in small, people do not just feel financially disappointed. They feel quietly devalued. They start wondering if they are overestimating their contribution. They start telling themselves they should just be grateful. They start lowering their expectations. And little by little, a compensation structure turns into a psychological structure. That is the real danger. The number does not just affect your bank account. It affects how you think you are allowed to see yourself. Now, before we go deeper, think about the last raise you got. Not the percentage, the feeling. Were you excited? Underwhelmed? Relieved? Confused? Did it make your life better in any real way? Or did it vanish into rent, groceries, insurance, and everything else so fast that it almost felt fictional? Because that reaction matters. It tells you whether your raise functioned as progress or as a performance. And a lot of modern salary raises are exactly that, a performance. Enough to preserve morale. Enough to avoid open resentment. Enough to keep the machine moving. But often nowhere near enough to create real financial movement for the employee receiving it. This is where the main problem begins. Most people think raises are supposed to track growth. You get better, more experienced, more efficient, more valuable, and your salary should rise in a way that reflects that. Sounds fair, sounds rational, sounds like how a healthy system should work. But that is not how most organizations actually operate. Most organizations are not asking, what is this person truly worth now compared to when they started? They are asking, what can we increase compensation by without breaking pay structures, department budgets, or internal precedent? That is a completely different question. One is about value. The other is about manageability. And once you understand that, the 3% raise stops looking mysterious. It starts looking predictable. Because 3% is not magical. It is safe. It is small enough to fit into planning, small enough to avoid disruption, small enough to keep annual increases feeling routine rather than transformative. In other words, It works beautifully for the system. It just often does not work beautifully for the person whose life is getting more expensive every year. Think about how strange that is. You are living in a world where housing can jump much more than 3%, groceries can jump more than 3%, insurance can jump more than 3%, and your own skill set, workload, and usefulness can expand much more than 3%. But the raise still shows up looking as if your value, your costs, and your life all live inside a calm, controlled spreadsheet. That mismatch is not an accident. It is one of the core features of how employment works. The company wants predictability. The employee needs adaptation. And whenever those two things collide, predictability usually wins unless the employee forces a different outcome. That is why so many people feel trapped even when they're doing everything they were told to do. Work hard, be dependable, be patient, stay loyal, prove yourself, wait your turn. Most people are taught this story early, and on the surface it sounds respectable. But what they are rarely told is that loyalty inside a rigid compensation system can become a discount the company quietly enjoys. If you are good, reliable, and unlikely to leave, your stability becomes part of the calculation. The less pressure you create, the less urgency there is to reprice you. That sounds harsh, but it explains a lot. It explains why new hires are sometimes paid more than internal employees with more knowledge. It explains why job hoppers often see faster income growth than loyal top performers. It explains why managers may praise you heavily while still approving only a minimal increase. Praise and pay do not operate on the same logic. Praise is cheap. Budget movement is political. And once you learn that distinction, you stop getting emotionally sedated by compliments that are not backed by numbers. Before I go further, write this in the comments. The one financial or career habit you want to improve after watching this. Maybe it is, I will ask for clearer pay expectations. Maybe it is, I will track my market value. Maybe it is, I will stop confusing praise with compensation. Maybe it is, I will prepare to negotiate. Put in writing. That matters because when you name something, it becomes real. It becomes a commitment instead of a vague frustration. And writing it down increases the chance that you will actually act on it instead of just nodding along and going back to the same cycle. Now let's dig into why 3% became such a familiar number in the first place. In many companies, annual raises are tied less to dramatic performance changes and more to standard review cycles, compensation bands, and cost planning. That means the annual raise is treated almost like maintenance rather than true repricing. The company is not saying, what would it take to fully realign this employee's salary with their current contribution? It is saying, what annual movement is normal and budget-friendly? This is why even strong performers often receive numbers that feel disconnected from their actual impact. And there is another reason this happens that most employees underestimate. Companies fear compounding. A big raise is not just a one-time reward. It becomes your new baseline. That means future increases, bonus percentages, and comparisons may now be anchored to a higher number. From the company's point of view, that is not a small decision. So unless there is a compelling reason to change the base aggressively, the system naturally leans towards small moves. That is also why employees often get their largest salary jumps when changing roles, getting promoted, or leaving the company entirely. Those are the moments when the system can justify a reset. But inside the same seat, with the same title, under the same annual cycle, there is powerful pressure to keep movement incremental. Not because your value increased incrementally, because the system prefers incrementalism. This is where the frustration becomes more personal. A lot of people are not just doing the same job a year later. They're doing more. They know more. They take on responsibilities that were not in the original job description. They train others. They fix things nobody else can fix. They become the person managers trust during pressure. And then the raise arrives and acts like none of that changed the value equation meaningfully. That creates a very specific kind of emotional confusion. People start questioning whether extra effort even matters if the compensation mechanism does not respond proportionally. And to be honest, sometimes that confusion leads to one of the most dangerous conclusions in professional life. Maybe this is just how it works everywhere. That belief is financially expensive, because once you internalize that tiny raises are universal and unavoidable, you stop looking for leverage. You stop researching market rates. You stop pushing for promotion. You stop exploring outside opportunities. You shrink your own imagination to fit the company's comfort zone. That is exactly how underpayment becomes self-reinforcing. But there is another layer here that matters just as much: inflation. Because even when a 3% raise looks respectable on paper, the real question is not how much your salary rose. The real question is how much your purchasing power rose. Those are not the same thing. If your expenses rise as fast as your raise, your life does not improve. If your expenses rise faster, the raise becomes psychological decoration, a symbolic pat on the head, while your real standard of living stays flat or slips backward. This is why so many people say, "I got a raise, but I still feel broke." They are not imagining it. Let's make this more concrete. Imagine someone named Daniel. Daniel joined a company at a decent starting salary. Every year, he received positive feedback. Reliable, smart, strong team player. Every year, his raise was somewhere around 3%. Nothing dramatic, just normal. 5 years later, Daniel had more responsibility, more knowledge, more stress, and a much larger role in the team than when he started. He also had a salary that lagged far behind what the market would likely pay for someone stepping into that same level of responsibility fresh. Daniel's mistake was not that he was bad at his job. His mistake was assuming that the annual raise mechanism was designed to catch up to reality. It usually is not. Now imagine another person, Maya. Maya also started in a role, worked hard, learned quickly, and received modest yearly raises. But she tracked job descriptions in the market. She had conversations with recruiters. She noticed what similar companies were paying. She documented what she had taken on. She understood that internal raises and market repricing are different systems. So when her employer gave her another small increase and called it competitive, she had enough perspective to know it was only competitive inside their internal logic, not in the broader market. That difference changed her behavior. Within a year, she moved roles and increased her salary by an amount that made several annual 3% raises look almost irrelevant. The point is not that everyone must leave immediately. The point is that 3% raises often keep people calm enough to stay, but underpaid enough to stagnate. That is the trap. Not obvious exploitation, managed contentment, just enough movement that you do not revolt. Just little enough that the company retains an advantage. And if you're not paying attention, you can spend years mistaking maintenance for growth. This is exactly why some of the most underpaid people in an organization are not the weakest performers. They're often the strongest, stable performers. The ones who absorb more work without constant drama. The ones managers trust not to explode. Stability is valuable to companies, but it can also become something companies lean on too comfortably. The calmer you are, the less urgent your repricing may feel to them. That is not fair, but it is real. And here is where this becomes even more psychologically tricky. Many people have complicated relationships with asking for more money. They do not want to seem ungrateful. They do not want to sound difficult. So they rationalize the small raise. They tell themselves the company is doing its best. They tell themselves next year will be better. They tell themselves they just need to prove a little more. That inner dialogue can go on for years. In the meantime, the market keeps moving, responsibilities keep expanding, and their salary remains anchored to a system built to move cautiously. This is a good place to say something important if this video is helping you see your own situation more clearly. Subscribe to the channel, not because it is a routine line, but because practical conversations like this only keep reaching more people when viewers who care about real financial thinking stay connected. The more people understand how compensation, psychology, and money actually work, the more likely they are to avoid years of quiet under-earning that nobody around them ever names clearly. Now let's talk about the performance review, because this is where a lot of salary myths get reinforced. Most employees walk into review season assuming performance is the central driver of pay. In theory, yes. In practice, performance is filtered through layers: manager discretion, department budgets, salary bands, calibration meetings, equity concerns, and leadership priorities. So even if your manager genuinely believes you deserve more, they may still operate inside a system that only allows limited movement. That is why people often hear some version of, "You're doing amazing work, but there are budget constraints," or "I agree you've grown a lot, but we have to be mindful of internal parity." Those phrases are not always lies, but they're also not solutions for you. And that is the key. A company's explanation for why they cannot pay you more may be completely sincere and still completely irrelevant to your financial future. Budget constraints do not change what your work is worth in the market. This is one of the most important shifts an employee can make, learning to hear company logic without letting it become their personal limit. Now let's address a myth that sounds smart but often keeps people passive. If I just become indispensable, the money will follow. Sometimes, but not automatically. Being indispensable can create leverage, but only if you know how to use it. Otherwise, it can create dependence in one direction only. The company depends on you, yes, but you also become the person who absorbs complexity without forcing compensation change. Many employees build themselves into these traps. They become incredibly useful, but never convert that into title, negotiating position, or external market value. Usefulness alone is not enough. You need usefulness plus leverage, plus timing, plus a willingness to create tension when necessary. That may sound uncomfortable, especially for viewers who prefer harmony. But harmony without leverage is often just polite underpayment. The workplace often rewards cooperation culturally while rewarding assertiveness financially. That contradiction confuses a lot of good people. They think if they're easy to work with, solutions-oriented, and loyal, the system will naturally take care of them. Sometimes it does. Often it does not. Now let's shift to the financial side, because the real cost of the 3% raise is not always obvious in the year you receive it. It shows up over time. 1 year of under-earning may feel manageable. 5 years can be life-changing. Why? Because salary does not only affect today's paycheck. It affects future raises, retirement contributions, savings capacity, debt payoff speed, lifestyle choices, and opportunity. A lower base compounds. That is why being underpaid by what seems like a modest amount can quietly become tens of thousands in lost earnings over a relatively short stretch of a career. There is also the issue of timing. Many people wait too long to confront this because they expect one more cycle to fix it. One more review, one more year, one more chance for management to notice. The trouble is compensation inertia gets stronger over time, not weaker. The longer a salary has been normalized inside a company, the more friction there is around moving it dramatically. So the employee waits for a correction that becomes structurally harder the longer they wait. That is why so many large salary jumps happen through external offers or role changes. Now, does this mean every 3% raise is insulting or meaningless? No. Context matters. If someone is already paid exceptionally well, if the company offers huge bonus upside, if the role has low stress and strong flexibility, then a small annual raise may fit inside a larger package that still works well. The point is not that 3% is always wrong. The point is that people too often accept it without understanding what it really means in their specific case. That is why one of the smartest things an employee can do is separate gratitude from analysis. You can appreciate having a job and still analyze whether you are underpaid. You can like your manager and still question the compensation structure. You can enjoy your team and still decide the financial trade-off no longer works for you. Many people struggle because they think advocating for pay requires becoming cynical or disloyal. It is not. It requires becoming clear. Clarity starts with a few hard questions. Has my role changed more than my pay? Could someone hired externally for my current responsibilities be paid more than I am? Am I staying because the package is truly competitive or because I am comfortable and afraid of disruption? If I got the same raise for the next 3 years, will my financial life improve meaningfully? Those questions are uncomfortable because they threaten the stories people use to stay still. But they're the questions that reopen possibility. And this is where we arrive at the biggest revelation in the whole topic. The truth about why your salary raise is always 3% is not just that companies are cheap, though sometimes they are. It is that most salary systems are built to preserve order, not to discover truth. They are designed to manage expectations, protect budgets, reduce volatility, and keep employees moving in predictable lanes. Your annual raise is often less a statement about your worth and more a statement about how much change the system can tolerate without having to rethink itself. That is the real truth. And once you see it, the emotional power of a number starts to weaken. This is the climax most people need. The raise was never meant to tell you everything. It was never a perfect mirror of your value. It was never the final judgment on your career trajectory. It was one move inside an institutional system with its own incentives, limitations, fears, and priorities. Once you stop treating it like a moral verdict, you become freer. Freer to evaluate yourself against the market. Freer to negotiate without shame. Freer to leave without feeling like you failed. Freer to realize that what looked like this is all I'm worth may actually have meant this is all the system was prepared to give without being forced. So what should you do with this? First, stop assuming your annual raise is an honest map of your value. It may not be. Second, learn the market for your role, your skills, and your level. Third, document how your responsibilities have expanded. Fourth, stop letting comfort sedate you into long-term underpayment. Fifth, know when internal negotiation makes sense and when the real answer may be a new role, a promotion push, or an external move. And sixth, understand that your financial future depends not only on how hard you work, but on whether you are willing to challenge systems that benefit from your silence. Because that is the final truth underneath the 3% raise. It survives not just because companies offer it, but because employees often accept its meaning too easily. They accept the number as identity. They accept the structure as destiny. They accept the slow pace as adulthood. And that acceptance is exactly what keeps the pattern alive. So the next time a raise comes in small, do not only ask whether the number is disappointing. Ask what system produced it. Ask what assumptions it makes about your loyalty, your passivity, your comfort, and your alternatives. Ask what would happen if you stopped treating annual review season like the only place your compensation story can change. Because often the biggest raise in your career will not come from waiting more patiently inside the same logic. It will come from stepping outside it. If this helped you see compensation in a completely different way, subscribe, keep learning about money and financial growth with this channel, and share this video with someone who keeps working harder every year but still feels financially stuck. There's also a natural next step from here, because once you understand why the 3% raise keeps happening, the next conversation is how to negotiate better, measure your market value, and know when staying loyal is costing you more than leaving ever would. That is where financial growth stops being theoretical and starts becoming real.